Welcome to the Create the Life You Want podcast, where we break down the journey of people just like you going from dream to ownership in business acquisitions, franchises, and startups. I'm your host, Jeremy Ames. Today's episode is brought to you ad-free by Guidant Financial. Guidant is America's leading company helping aspiring entrepreneurs use retirement funds to buy or start businesses. If you're committed to buying or starting a business, you can find out more about your funding options by going to www.guidantfinancial.com. That's Guidant financial.com. Now, let's get started with the show. Welcome, everyone, to the Create the Life You Want podcast. Today, I am joined by Bill Doshier, and he's got an interesting story. He comes from a long line of entrepreneurs, and he purchased a top-level domain. So most of you are familiar with .coms. Bill owns .buzz, and we're going to find out what that actually means and what that entails from a business model. So Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Great to be here.
Well, Bill, why don't you give us a little bit of background? What were you doing before you became a business owner?
Right. Lot of different jobs over the start of my career. The last job I had before I got into the domain business was I was an outside salesman for an aerospace material distributor out of Little Rock, Arkansas. And I spent 20 years with them and had a great career, great company, but just got the desire to do something on my own and became aware of this opportunity in the domain name industry and decided to take a leap of faith and started the process to apply for a top-level domain and made the move from a salesman to what we would call a domainer in today's internet world.
Okay. How do you become aware of the ability to buy a top-level domain?
That a lot of people ask me that question. So somewhere around the 1996 or so, .com was becoming very popular. If you go back, this was the time of AOL and Prodigy, and the internet was just catching on. And I was aware of domain names because of my interest in the internet. So in 1996, 97, somewhere in there, I bought a few .coms, and you could really tell that I didn't know a whole lot about what I was doing because my names still today aren't worth that much money. But some of the names that were available back then, if I'd have been a little smarter and known a little bit more about investing in .com names, I could have done a whole lot better. But I did get an introduction to the domain industry and specifically the .com market. You fast forward probably 10 to 12 years, I find a news announcement while I'm kind of looking through some internet stuff that an organization called ICANN, which is the International Corporation of Assigned Names and Number. They're the kind of the governing body over the domain naming system. They were having an application period for folks to operate new top-level domains. So a top-level domain is everything right of the dot when you type in a web address. So if you did BillDoshier.com, the .com is the top-level domain. And so I looked at this opportunity and I thought, man, what is this all about? I need to know more. And I started making a few phone calls to folks. I just cold called people that I knew were top domainers out there, and I started asking questions. And the biggest question was, if you applied for one of these new top-level domains and you were a small businessman and you were trying to operate this name by yourself, could you do it? And the overwhelming answer I got was, yeah, it'd be a lot of work, but you could. So long story short, I investigated it further. I looked into it and just, stroke of luck, put an application in for .buzz, B-U-Z-Z, and ended up about a year to a year and a half later being granted the license to run the .buzz top-level domain.
Okay, so did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or was this just an opportunistic thing when you saw that article, you thought, maybe I'll do this?
Oh, yeah. I come from a long line of entrepreneurial types. My father was a small town attorney that worked all his life in a law office by himself. My uncle was a farmer. I had grandparents that were what we would call peddlers, salesmen, or they worked carpenters. Just there never seemed to be too many Dozier men out there that wanted to work for somebody else. And so I think it's part of my genetics to want to be independent and to start my own business. So there was always that yearning. Sales was great. As most salespeople know, you kind of are your own boss, especially if you work for an organization that rewards a self-starter and a good relationship salesperson. But it's not quite the same as operating your own business. So absolutely understood. My passion was that someday I wanted to have my own little business.
Got it. And you settled on top level domain. It sounds like you did a bunch of research to figure out what it would entail. So what did you learn about what was required to own it and what was required to sort of buy or invest in it?
Well, ICANN had an application period which basically spelled out what you had to be able to provide them to allow them to license you the name. And that was a pretty detailed process. That took all of a year to get that application in, the financials, personal background, everything that went with that, what your business plan was going to be, what you would price the name at. So that took a lot of time to kind of figure that out. And I had a couple of consultants within the domain industry helping me. But the biggest problem of all was trying to figure out what name you were going to apply for. And so I had a list of all kinds of great names. I liked .club, I liked .music, I liked .social. But I'm a small businessman. I didn't have unlimited funding to go into this. And I needed a name that nobody else would think of. There was a concept in the application period called contention, which basically meant if two people applied for the same name, they would have an auction between the two parties, and basically the winner would be the highest bid. I couldn't play in that game. So I needed a name that was kind of below the radar. And I remember it just like it was yesterday. I was sitting watching, I don't know, it was either MTV or some music video program with my oldest son. And all of a sudden we saw the word buzz come across the screen. And I said, that's it. That's the word. And my son, Michael, he kind of looked at me and he knew what I was up to. And he said, that's a good one. That's a young word, a lot of vibe. Again, we're talking 10 to 12 years ago on this. And so the process itself of applying for the name was pretty straightforward, checking all the boxes for ICANN. Picking the name out that you wanted to go for was difficult. And that little instance where we were sitting there together watching videos, the word buzz popped up, and that led me to apply for .buzz. And in the end, I was the only applicant for .buzz.
What does it cost if you're competing against no one? Obviously, it can be unlimited depending on how many people are competing for a domain.
Yeah, well, there's some great stories around this if you do some searching on what contention set names went for. The actual application was a significant amount, $185,000 to apply for the name. So you were into this thing after consultants and all, somewhere around the $200,000.
Just to apply, Bill? Like even if you don't get it, you're out $200,000?
Well, that's if you possibly got money back from the auction. If you lost the auction, then the money was spread out between the parties that were involved in the auction. So you had a chance to get money back in the auction. But ICANN had a reasonable get out plan where if you got into the program and you found out that there was a problem with getting it approved or a contention set, there were outs to get your money back. But the initial application itself at that time was $185,000. So you had to know what your plans were. It wasn't you just going to take a shot.
Yeah.
You had to have a business plan. You had to come up with what you were going to do with the name. and the business plan you had, and you had to find people to sell the name for you. So all that had to be kind of laid out, or you really didn't have any business going into it as far as, putting that kind of money down with no plan. That wasn't an option.
So tell me about the business plan. What did you figure out the model was going to look like? How were you going to make money? How much were you having to pay these other companies to sell it for you? Like, how does that all work?
Yeah. So the business plan when I started, or what the business plan turned into.
Well, let's go back to what you started with, and then we'll talk about the evolution.
Yeah. Uh, the business plan itself, starting off, was exactly around what buzz generally means, and that's a new product creation, marketing, PR. Again, going back, I came from a sales world. I was big into creating buzz, so to say, around our products that we sold. And so my idea was, I'll just carry this forward into some kind of sales plan. I thought, surely there'll be some nice marketing firms want to get involved with buzz, some advertising agencies, just the whole what's happening now, creating new ideas, new product, and then everything around that buzz around those ideas. And so that was my initial goal. I was going to go out and I was going to cold call, make phone calls, basically make sales calls like I had done previously on groups that I thought would be interested in associating their product, their idea, their business around creating .buzz.
Got it. That was what you started with, and then you launched. By the time you launched, how much were you into this thing? Was it about a couple $100,000, or were there other investments you had to make beyond the application process?
No, it was right around there, and it took about 6 to 8 months from the time that the application was approved to get the name launched, because there were 1,000 new TLDs, and so ICANN had to take their time in launching these to what we call the domain name system within the internet infrastructure, because they didn't want all these things coming live at once. And so I ended up with a number 255 was my number as far as being slotted in the 1,000 that would be launched. And so it took a little while to get to the launch period. But, somewhere, I think around February of 2014, I've just celebrated my 11th year, we launched Buzz.
Okay, so tell me how the business model works. How do you make money? And what are your biggest expenses?
Biggest expenses are, let's start with how the business works. So the idea is, I am the marketing side of .buzz. I do not sell names myself. I have partners, and the one name that most folks will recognize is GoDaddy.
Yep.
GoDaddy in our business is called a registrar. Buzz is called the registry. And Jeremy, if you registered a .buzz name, you would be called the registrar. So the registry hands off its business model or its name to the registrar, GoDaddy. And then GoDaddy on their platform makes you, the domain name buyer, the registrant, aware that .buzz is available. And so at this point, it's like buying a .com. You're just seeing names that make sense for you. And if buzz is an idea that you like or a word that you like to open your business on or build your web page on, you would buy as the registrant a .buzz name from a registrar, GoDaddy. And then at the end of the month, GoDaddy, and I've got 125 registrar partners like GoDaddy, they put all the money together that they've sold. They take out what they get, and then they send a check to me. So the way you make money is I price my name basically the same to all my registrar partners, and then they put their markup that they need on top of that name as they go out to their registrants and sell the name. And then all that's resolved in the end of the month, and I get paid my part and they keep their part. I do run promos. There are certain registrar partners that will come to me and ask me if we can do this many names in a month. Can you give us some kind of price that we can work with that's a little bit better? And so like any business, we're looking for opportunities to do promos with our partners that can move larger numbers of names to their customers out there.
And so are you largely just doing marketing, or are you also having to maintain the database of these that connects with the registrars? Or are you having to do do you have servers that are managing these? Like, what are you doing behind the scenes?
Right. So I'm the marketing end. My job is to make as many people aware that .buzz exists as possible.
Got it.
So I do a little travel each year. I go to a number of conferences, a number of meetings, and make people aware that I've been to beekeeping meetings, I've been to cannabis meetings, I've been to advertising meetings. I've been all over the place trying to make Buzz more aware, people more aware that Buzz is out there. To your particular question of what else goes on as far as running the name and the technical side of it, so to speak, that's one of my expenses. I outsource that. So you have registry support folks out there that are taking care of all of the back end technical support, where I don't even have to worry about that. I just step back and let them take care of that. And then that little part where I said that the money comes into GoDaddy and my partners, then they send it. There's actually that one step of sending it to that back end support group before it comes to me. So there is a group that's handling all the wires and technical servers and everything going on in the background between me and my selling partners. So back to the expenses, you've got that expense that you pay your back-end support, let's say. Then I've got an expense to ICANN, which I pay them a fee per name. That's my licensing fee, so to speak. And then other than that, it's really marketing expenses and what it takes to make people more aware that the name's out there.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of hands in the pot. So I'm guessing with the model, it sounds almost like being an author. You get a couple bucks every time there's a domain name.
Well, it's exactly, and the beauty of think about this business model. I have a product that is sold by my 120 partners 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day in every country in the world.
Yeah.
And Jeremy, I can tell you right now, I get up in the morning and I make the biggest part of my business comes in while I'm asleep at night. About 70% of the revenue for Buzz happens internationally. And then the balance happens in the North America area during the rest of the day. And when we go back to the initial business plan and what's actually happening right now, it's the business just took me in a completely different direction than what I ever expected.
Yeah.
Not a bad direction at all. I think every small businessman wants that opportunity where he's making money while he's asleep. Yeah. You always hear that. And with this little business, you have partners that are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 a year in every nation on the globe.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what has evolved.
I look at it now and I see more blogging type stuff, personal sites more so than business sites. I see small communities. I mentioned my beekeeper communities. There's a lot of honey, a lot of hive, a lot of bee type themed domain names out there. I've participated in the recent crypto and AI movement on the internet. I mean, that AI is the buzz right now, and so Buzz fits the name that I started with and why I started with it. Fits with what's going on with crypto and AI with small startups. But 10 to 12 years ago, there was no such thing as crypto or AI. We weren't talking about it, but it is the buzz. And so I've just seen from what I expected from advertising, PR, sales, that kind of idea, it's really broken out into kind of an international cool little word. It looks cool. It's got the 2 Z's on the end of it. I think people look at it and they say, that's pretty cool. I like buzz, creating buzz. That's fun. And so it fits with whatever's going on right now. And, I got my smaller communities like the beekeepers. And then I've got some larger stuff developing more so now with the crypto side and a lot of gaming stuff going on, and then also AI starting to come more into play.
Got it. Tell us a little bit about the trajectory. I'm guessing you had some pretty big plans for how quickly this was going to grow that maybe didn't happen as fast, but this sounds like the kind of business that can accumulate over time. So help us understand what that's looked like.
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things I would tell any businessman, small business guy that's looking to start their own business is don't limit your other opportunities to find secondary income while you're starting your business. Because I went 7 years before this thing started cash flowing. And so I actually took a job at a local university in their marketing department. And they liked my buzz idea. They knew I was applying and they knew I was working on it. So they wanted me to bring that to the classroom at the University of Central Arkansas in Conway, Arkansas. So I spent 6 great years teaching entrepreneurship, and my title was the executive, if I can do the quotes here, executive in residence, because I was starting .buzz. So it started off slow, and I was surprised by that because every single top level domain that I had read about up to this point had been super popular. And, folks were making instant wealth by being involved in a naming product on the internet. Well, mine came out, like I told you, 255th of the new 1,000. So that was not the case with Buzz. And so it took about 7 years to start seeing the business pick up to where I could totally concentrate it on it. I left the University of Central Arkansas, told my buddies there that I was going to focus on Buzz. And about that time, it kind of broke out in Asia and other parts of the world. I got a little aggressive with my promos. I started being a little more competitive with pricing, and that attracted more of an international market. Pretty much at that point, I'd concentrated on North America. But I had some partners that kind of told me what it would be like to go overseas and that I needed to be more aggressive, and it worked. And so I started seeing year after year the volume grow. And we went from maybe 30,000 names to 60,000 names to 100,000 names. And here, just in the last couple of years, there's been about 350 to 370,000 Buzz names out there. So the beauty of that is you do not make a whole lot of money on an initial registration. But as you stack those registrations up year after year, the renewals start coming in behind that. And that's where my registrar partners and myself as the Buzz registry start being able to make money and cash flow the business, because it's the razor blade and the razor.
Is that because
you get that?
Is that because, Bill, the costs to set these things up from the get-go with your outsourcing partner is enough that it's eating most of that money away in the first year?
So explain the question again for me.
So I'm trying to understand what the business model, because you said it's not really until they are renewing that you're starting to make money. I was hypothesizing, is that because of the outsourcing partner, it's more work up front to get the thing set up initially?
Right, yeah. So let's say GoDaddy sells a name for me, and they'll do a great job of upselling what's necessary now for you, the registrant, to work with Buzz and create something of value with the name. So you might put your website up. You might do something just as basic as having an email. So there's a lot that goes into, I think you're saying and understand, there's a lot goes into making that name of value to the registrant so they will renew.
Yeah.
And so the business model as far as pricing is give my partners something they can work with to sell, like portfolio guys, portfolio managers of names. And then they'll go to work at marketing the name, making more people aware of the name, and then helping people that buy the name, the registrants, set up their websites, get their emails set up. And then if you've got a website up, you're not going to worry about spending $25, $35, $50 a year to renew that name. And so that's what we work on.
Got it. And is that about the price? I mean, the last time I registered a domain name, I want to say it was like 15 to 20 bucks or something a year. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah. You can find a buzz name through a number of different registrars for anywhere from $3 to $5 first year. But then you're going to renew it for somewhere around $25 going forward.
Got it.
And then the other part of that model is I have certain premium names that are priced anywhere from $100 a year up to $2,000.
Got it.
So example of a premium name, going back to one of my favorites, if you want to register music.buzz, you would pay $2,000 a year to work with music.buzz.
Got it.
And so there are different levels. Words on the internet, words have value, and certain words have significantly more value than others. Buzz is a mid-level secondary word on the internet. Music is a top level as far as what they're worth as far as dollars.
Yep. Makes sense. What has been the biggest learning for you, Bill, in your 11 plus years of doing this?
Yeah, I think the most effective lesson I learned and change I made was when I decided to let my registrar partners, the GoDaddies of the world, do what they do best, and that is market my product. And I just made it easier for them to do that. To a certain point, I was trying to come up with ways of attracting an audience on all of the social media platforms that we have. And it was, not great. First off, I didn't have the funding to really do it right. And I didn't know exactly what I was doing. So I would hire somebody to help me know what I was doing, but they were working with other bigger, larger clients. So it was kind of secondary. And I wasn't getting the job done. And so I think the biggest lesson I learned was I needed another way to make people aware that Buzz was out there. And so I started doing some promos with my registrar partners. And part of the deal was, I'm going to give you these names for this price, but you're also going to take charge in making your customers aware in more than just putting it on your webpage that Buzz is available, like email blast and Google ads and Facebook and Twitter type or X type stuff. And that was probably the most significant move made. And then not being afraid to go international. I always had this idea that Buzz was going to be really cool and it was going to be in North America and we were just going to have a nice little business concentrating on my general area of life. And, that was limiting the name and being able to figure out a way to move internationally was a huge, huge lesson.
Yeah, it sounds like with the registrars that you basically went from a consumer direct marketing approach to a partner marketing approach. So
correct. Exactly. They can do it so much better than I can.
Yeah, and tell us about what it entails to go international. What needed to change? Like you needed to flip a switch, you needed to price something different, you needed to represent something in Japanese characters. Like what does that entail?
Yeah. It was relatively simple. I needed to form some relationships with some registrars that were in India, that were in Europe, that were in Asia. At that particular point, I probably had 15 or 20 registrars that were working hard for me, but I didn't have any internationally based registrars. And so it was a matter of getting on an airplane and going to some conferences and sitting down and, being an old sales guy, I love the relationship sell, the face-to-face sell. And I think that's where I do my best work. And I just knew I needed to get in front of some people and let them know, hey, my other registrar partners are doing really well with Buzz. We're making money on the front end and then we're getting good renewals. And I want you to be aware of that. Let's do some business. And it was a good year to 2 years of just being out there and forming those relationships with registrar partners that I hadn't really spoke to up to that point.
Sounds like you had business write-off trips internationally.
I did. I've seen a lot of places that I've never thought. I've been to the Great Wall of China. I mean, you can just take it from there and come on down to all the cool spots that I've been able to go to by working this little name.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you were starting the business, Bill, what did you see as the biggest risks, and how did you think about mitigating those?
I've got an interesting story there. When I made my move from the previous sales job to this Buzz project, I was 51 years old. There simply was no plan B, and I've got people that I started this business with that's the one thing they remember about me when I started Buzz was I kept saying, "There's no plan B. It has to work. It has to work." And I came from a sales operation where we ran a very, very lean business. And so I knew with the limited funding I had that I couldn't have a big staff to help me sell names. I basically had to be a one-man show. So the biggest risk was running out of money before this name took off. Now, it never was something I was really totally concerned with because these names have value, and just launching the name itself, having it available on the internet is worth considerably more than $185,000. So the risk of launching was first and getting it out there. But then you knew you had something of value at that point. It was just your job, my job, to make it work. So there was no plan B. This was going to work, and I just went at it and put basically everything I've got. It totally consumes me to this day. I mean, from the time I wake up in the morning to the time I go to bed at night, I'm thinking about Buzz and looking at numbers and looking at words. Not knowing the business as well as some of my competitors was a risk. I had to learn quick. I had to have good mentors, good consultants advising me. So there was some significant risk out there, but really and truly, it's a great business model. And if you've got a cool word and you can get it up and running, you have an asset that's worth something. You just have to take it and work it and make it worth more.
Yeah. How did you find those consultants and mentors?
Yeah, it's not hard. There's some, as you can imagine, engineers and consultants and salespeople around the internet. There are a lot of really, really sharp.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that will take your money. I'm curious how you found the people that were helpful.
Yeah, you use a lot of references, and sometimes you just have to take a shot and gut feel. Coming from sales background kind of helps. You had enough back and forth with folks to know kind of what that feels like to you in your gut. But a lot of the guys that I started with advising me, 11, 12 years ago are still my go-to guys today. And that's anything from attorneys, accountants. Basically, I've got one guy in Austin, Texas that handles all my registrar relationships as far as the paperwork and the contracting that goes with them. He's been with me since day one. He brought me GoDaddy to the fold. That was the grand prize of getting Buzz started, was actually having GoDaddy sell your names. It's not that easy. So I've stuck with the people that have been good to me. I've been good to them. They've been good to me, and we've got some good business relationships.
So a top level domain, is there a market for resales of these? How does that work?
We see them change hands you'll see 2, 3, 4 change hands during the course of the year. Interesting to that point, I'm probably, I may be the only person out there now in our internet world that's a single TLD operator. And I don't know if that's a good place to be or not, because I get calls, I get quite a few calls wondering what I'm going to do. Yep. What's your plan? Are you going to keep it? Are you going to turn it into a legacy business? Are you going to retire soon? Are you going to sell it? And we start a conversation, but usually it doesn't really go too far. I'm too high, they're too low, that type thing on the pricing. But yes, to answer your question, there's been some crazy sales over the last few years. Some of my best buddies started the .club domain, TLD. They sold out about 2 or 3 years ago. Just a remarkable job on their part. So it's like a lot of businesses. There's starting to be a group of 4 or 5 players that are significantly larger. Yeah, and you'll see there's a group out there that's operating 300 of these things now. There's a group out there that's operating 5 to 10. I think I'm the only one that's a single TLD operator, single individual operator.
And
so
how are they valued? Are they valued just like normal businesses where it's a percentage of EBITDA, or are you seeing valuations based on number of domains or something like that?
Yeah, they'll look at everything, but mostly it's the bottom line number and evaluation of EBITDA. But there are a few other things that come along. They'll look at your premium names as far as the value that's in your premium portfolio. They'll look at your total domains under management as far as, and then they'll do some numbers on what that means per renewal based on your renewal percentages. I think I don't think it's as big as it used to be, but that list of registrar partners that you've got, people that are actually selling your name, if you've done the work to get those folks on board, that has value to it. So in the end, it's I've got a price, they've got a price. Can we find a way to get to a right number? And that's generally what goes on. But if you're breaking it down, what you're talking about is basically still the model. And since it's a subscription model, nice multiple on it also.
Yeah. Sounds like the big things you did to limit your risk, Bill. One was you went and got a job. And you said, I'm going to make sure I've got some income coming in while this thing is building up. And that really made a big difference for you in your ability to have a long enough runway.
No doubt. And that, I've seen too many young entrepreneurs totally settled in on my way is going to work and basically not having any, I'm not going to say backup plan because in my case there was no plan B, but some way to generate income. And in my situation, the job that I offered allowed me to talk more and more about Buzz to young students, and it just fit. It actually probably helped me learn a lot about what my business could be for younger customers than if I hadn't have had the job.
Interesting.
So it was a good fit for what I was doing at the time. But you're right. I mean, I didn't know it was going to start off as slow. And so the opportunity came to work with the university, and I took it, and it was a big part of getting to the point where we could go out on our own.
Yeah, sounds like it was critical. Now, it sounds like the initial investment here was a couple $100,000. So how did you decide how to fund it? You just have money in savings you were ready to use? Did you take out a loan? What were all the ways you looked at putting the pieces together?
Right. I only had one way, and that's where guidance came into the picture. So my previous job in sales, I worked for this company for 19 years, and they had a ESOP, an employee stock ownership plan.
Okay.
And I participated for 19 years in a really great time with that company. It was just on a super growth plan. And at the end of my 19 years, I had a significant amount of money in my ESOP account. And so that's where I had to go to access funds. I didn't want to borrow money. That might have been an option, but I had the money, and I knew what I wanted to invest it in. I wanted to invest it in a top level domain, and it was just a matter of me trying to figure out how to do that. And obviously, this is where our two companies came in to a relationship. Was you guys, Guidant Financial, offered the plan that I needed to take part of that money out of my ESOP account or my 401k account at that particular point and roll it into my new business.
Got it. So that's how you funded it initially.
Yeah.
And what's your long-term plan with this? I mean, here's maybe
Yeah.
let me get to that question in a minute. What I'm more curious about is this TLD market. Is it dead from the perspective of new entrants, or are there still opportunities here that you see?
Man, what a timely question. Have you been researching it?
No, not at all. I didn't even know what TLD meant before we got on a phone call, Bill.
Round two is being discussed as we speak. I'm headed to Seattle Sunday for an ICANN meeting where they're going to be putting the finishing touches on a second round of new TLD applications. Maybe I shouldn't be spouting this out to everybody on a podcast, but hey, if you want to jump in, go for it. That's what I say. It's not as easy as it looks. It takes some work, but we've got new TLDs coming, and it may be another 2 or 3 years, but I believe the plan is for applications to start being accepted in April of next year. So there's a lot of planning that goes on with ICANN and the community to make certain that this goes smoothly for the applicants and for the internet. I mean, you're actually talking about owning a part of the internet infrastructure when you have one of these names. So everything has to be right. But we've got new TLDs coming, and it's going to start next year early on as far as the applications going.
How many TLDs
So I'm going to Seattle to learn more and kind of think about it a little bit.
How many TLDs are even out there right now?
Oh gosh, I should know this. It's you've got country codes. So .us is the country code for the United States, and then you've got normal TLDs. I'm going to say we're around 3,000 or so right now.
3,000. Okay. Interesting. So there's only 3,000 pieces of real estate in this particular country, but they're potentially looking at opening up more.
Right. There's 3,000 and I own one.
But it sounds like you're considering maybe owning a second one.
I've got some ideas. I do have some ideas.
Well, I won't ask you about that because I know you're going to keep those close.
I may have told my wife. I can't remember if I've actually told her or not, but those are kind of things you just don't let out until you get the application in and everything wraps up and people can't find out what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, here's my final question for you, Bill. Some young person comes to you and says, well, maybe not even young person. Someone comes to you, they're in their 40s. They say, hey, Bill, I'm thinking about starting my own business. Would love to know what's the best piece of advice you've got for me.
You got to keep it as lean as possible. And the reason for that is you just have no idea at that point where all of your expenses are going to come from. And I learned from my work in sales that you'll always have problems with customers. You'll always have problems with accounts receivables. You'll always have inventory problems that you can take care of. But if you start hiring people too soon, you'll never end up having enough people. You'll always have people problems. And it's something that can just totally bog you down and cost you money. So I purposely, and one of the reasons that this has been a successful operation is it's just me. And so I manage it and I keep it lean. And that would be my main advice. The other little piece of the puzzle is people talk about passion. And that's great. I mean, you have to have passion, but it's really more than passion. It's something that you just really enjoy. And I love looking at words now. I mean, it's just like I know the value of a word as far as a short 3-letter word versus a 7 or 8-letter word. I know enough about this business now and enjoy it so much that I understand the value of these assets. And that's fun. I mean, that is kind of cool being involved in something that very few people understand, very few people know, but you enjoy learning the business as you work it. And so that's no doubt passion is important for your business, but I think it's really and truly a bigger step than that. It's like you truly want to dig into it every single day and learn from it and try to figure out ways to make the business better.
Well, Bill, I think you've got an inspiring journey. I'm curious because I don't know anything about the market. You invested $200,000 to start this thing up. What do you think it's probably worth today in terms of how much you've been able to grow it over 11 years? I'm trying to gauge how much has it been worth your time for the 11 years you put in?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I have friends that have retired and they worry about the stock market every single day. I don't worry about the stock market. I worry about domain names and the internet. So there's been some peace of mind not having to ride the stock market that's truly of value to me. But I have turned down significant, what would it be, 7-figure numbers for buzz that would allow me and my family to be fine. Yeah. I'm not talking about the Facebook type stuff or the Instagram type stuff, but numbers that you would expect come from a small one-man operation that's doing okay in the internet space. Yeah, so it's been very successful.
Sounds like you've still 5 or 10 money when you think about what you've done there. So that's fantastic.
Oh yeah.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for your time. I think you have an inspiring story. It's certainly interesting. You taught me a whole lot about top-level domains that I never understood. And just wish you continued luck in your growth. Thanks for listening to the Create the Life You Want podcast. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to future episodes by clicking the subscribe button, you know where. If you're an aspiring business owner, you may also want to subscribe to the Create the Life You Want newsletter for more inspiration and tips delivered to your inbox every week. You can find the link to that in the show notes, as well as on my personal website, jeremyames.com. If you've already decided you want to start or buy a business, consider exploring your financing options by heading to our sponsor's website at www.guidantfinancial.com. That's GUIDANT financial.com. See you in the next episode.